Myoho Renge Kyo Nam Myoho Renge Kyo Nam Myoho Renge Kyo.
All right, here we go with part 2. The Great Collection Sutra says, when the teachings of the Buddha truly become obscured and lost, then people will all let their beards, hair, and fingernails grow long, and the laws of the world will be forgotten and ignored. At that time, loud noises will sound in the air, and the earth will shake. Everything in the world will begin to move as though it were a water wheel. City walls will split and tumble, and all houses and dwellings will collapse. Roots, branches, leaves, petals, and fruits will lose their medicinal properties, with the exception of the heavens of purity. There's a note on that. That's part of the expedient means. All the regions of the world of desire will become deprived of the 7 flavors and the 3 kinds of vitality, until not a trace of them remain anymore. All the good discourses that lead people to emancipation will at this time disappear. The flowers and fruits that grow in the earth will become few and will lose their flavor and sweetness. The wells, springs, and ponds will all go dry, and land everywhere will turn brackish and will crack open and warp into hillocks and gullies. All the mountains will be swept by fire, and the heavenly beings and dragons will no longer send down rain. The seedlings of the crops will all wither and die. All the living plants will perish, and even the weeds will cease to grow anymore. Dust will rain down until all is darkness, and the sun and moon no longer shed light. You know, as I'm reading this, I'm wanting to remind you that, again, this is a time when Japan was experiencing extreme weather changes, droughts, famine as a result, earthquakes, all sorts of problems. What's interesting, though, is what Nichiren is quoting here. The Great Collection Sutras, are from millennia before him, thousands of years before him. Some hundreds, some thousands. Anyway, so it's not like humanity hasn't experienced these grave conditions before. But what's notable here is that he's quoting sermons and teachings, the scholarship of his study, and he's pointing out that, you know, we're right now in Japan, or as you might notice, the wildfires in California and the earthquakes we're experiencing all over the world, incredibly bad ones. Look at Fukushima. People's memory is pretty short. Fukushima is still continuing to poison our oceans and kill off entire species of fish and decimate the economy of towns all along the west coast, from Alaska all the way down into South America. We still haven't dealt with the amount of radiation we're feeling even inland, not just coastal, but here in the South. I saw a video recently where, you know, the nuclear agencies, in the 80s we talked a lot about this because Reagan was going crazy with warfare. And a lot of us young anti-nuke people, you know, they said that it was like 30, is it radions? 30, there was this measure, I wish I could remember all that stuff, but anyway, just think of the number disparity. 30 was a maximum that a human being could not that we should at all, but there was an amount of radiation measurement that said that we wouldn't incur serious harm if we kept it under 30. Before that, I think it was, you know, like, I don't want to give you a wrong number. What I do remember is that Somebody took one of these meters with them on a flight across the Pacific from the area of Japan all the way through over to the West Coast and into Atlanta. And by the time we got to Atlanta, the numbers were in the thousands. Not 35, not 40, not 100, thousands. And this is like 5 years after Fukushima. So don't kid yourself. All of these great disasters we read about, they seem like almost like fantasy. Well, we're living in them. You don't have to believe in climate change to understand that we're living with radiation poisoning. Look at what he says about food. Our food, look at the MGOs, the Monsanto things, the scandals that are constantly coming out about how our food supply is just being deprived of vitamins. Everything is filled with sugar now to give it flavor, and that's leading us to our diabetes epidemic, and so on and so forth. So I just want to give you a little, when you read this stuff, it may sound, dramatic and fairy tale-ish, but it's not that different than what we're experiencing now. It's just in a different form. All the four directions will be afflicted by drought, and evil omens will appear again and again. The 10 evil acts will increase greatly, particularly greed, anger, and foolishness. Gosh, no example of that today. And people will think no more of their fathers and mothers than does the roe deer. Living beings will decline in numbers, in longevity, physical strength, dignity, and enjoyment. Dignity, certainly. They will become estranged from the delights of the human and heavenly realms, and all will fall into the paths of evil. The paths of evil. I wish I could translate that into something else, but in Buddhist parlance, this is a reference to the 10 worlds. If you don't know the 10 worlds, please study up on that. That they're basically all the life conditions we transmigrate through from moment to moment, from anguish and hell to hunger and manipulativeness to rapture and joy to learning and realization, to helping others, bodhisattva and Buddhahood, epiphanies, enlightenment. The wicked rulers and monks who perform these 10 evil acts will curse and destroy my correct teaching and make it difficult for those in the human and heavenly realms to stay there. At that time, the benevolent deities and heavenly kings who ordinarily take pity on living beings will abandon this impure and evil nation, and all will make their way to other regions. And when he talks about these deities, I want to remind you again, almost without fail, everything in sermons, Buddhist sermons, sutras, all of these gods, deities, creatures, what have you, bodhisattvas, they're named to capture an aspect of human behavior, human consciousness, human ways of thinking. So when he talks about heavenly deities, what he's talking about is, if you've ever been to a music concert or a poetry reading or an event where a large amount of people gather, the atmosphere changes. Okay, this isn't something you're going to read in a mathematics manual, but it's something that you experience, that you know is true. That when people gather and they all have a similar mindset, a similar goal, a similar, they act in unison in some way. Mob mentality. You could count off examples of this, right? When the energy of the people is in the same realm, I won't say matches because we're all different, but you understand what I'm saying. There's a pervasive atmosphere that develops, and situations, opportunities, things can happen simply because of that. You may have heard in recent years the law of attractiveness. It's kind of based on this. So in Buddhism, those are labeled as gods or deities for convenience. Remember that concert we went to. Remember that kind of atmosphere that was charged. And if what he's saying here, then these are Shakyamuni's writings. If you degrade from that, if you betray that, if you work against that, then that atmosphere, that charged atmosphere of opportunity, it disappears, doesn't it? So in a way, you could say that those heavenly spirits depart. But it's just another way of saying it, right? So again, the hyperbole of teachings, the word escapes me now, the devices, the expedient means. That's what we're talking about here, all right? I'll try not to remind you of that too much, but I don't want you to get lost in the story. I want you to really concentrate on the meaning and how it's relevant to you in your life today. The Benevolent Kings Sutra, an entire story based on this. When a nation becomes disordered, it is the spirits that first show signs of rampancy. Because the spirits become rampant, all the people of the nation become disordered. Invaders come to plunder the country, and the common people face annihilation. The ruler, the high ministers, the crown prince, the other princes, and the 100 officials all quarrel with one another over right and wrong. Heaven and earth manifest prodigies and strange occurrences. The 28 constellations, the stars and the sun and moon appear at irregular times and the irregular positions, and numerous outlaws rise up. Well, let's talk about that. I don't think, no matter what your political leanings, I don't think you can avoid, apologize for bending over and picking stuff up, you can avoid the obvious that after the 2016 election, with this grotesque display of avarice and warmongering power. I mean, Bolton and it's not just Trump. But the point I want to make is this is exactly what Nichiren is talking about here, and he's quoting exactly what Shakyamuni was talking about. When we allow ourselves to indulge in these lower kinds of thinking, lower paths in Buddhism, greed, anger, foolishness, ignorance, and we willfully, it doesn't take much, in other words, to turn a craven desire, and we do this, we're humans, sometimes we want to play with the flame, play with the fire, right? And it so quickly happens that the moment you play with that, it becomes justified as, well, let's go there. And then the next thing you know, it becomes the lens through which everything is seen. How long did it take before we heard all of the angry, disgusting rhetoric from this campaign? Whether you call it racism or misogyny or fear-mongering, whatever you choose to call it, from your white supremacist groups to all of these other tangent organizations, suddenly felt empowered. They started doing stuff because they felt empowered. And all of a sudden we have this rampage going on across the country of just lawlessness, angry, violent uprisings, all because those people feel like suddenly their fringe thoughts are merited and they gain justification. And so they begin to act out. And now it goes from thoughts and words to actual actions. And people get killed, people die. And it's like a bloodlust. It takes over. I'm telling you, I hate to make this prediction, but I don't think you need to be much of a genius to see it. How close to a precipice we are of just launching the whole world into very, very, very scary times. Both with violence, war, mayhem. And this time, I don't think the North American continent will escape being scathed by it. And certainly, economically. And we're all being affected by that today. But there's still this pablum, this whitewash, that this veil that's being thrown over everything because of the power of media, of propaganda. Don't look over here, look over here. And so as I read this, it's inescapable to not see the parallels. And this is what Nichiren was talking about in the 13th century. He was raising the alarm bells. He, look, look, look. You guys are just merrily going along and you're avoiding these signs, these not premonitions, signs, omens from the earth itself. Things are not right. The same sutra also states, now when I use the 5 types of vision to clearly perceive the 3 existences, I see that in their past existences, all the rulers served 500 Buddhas, and that is the reason that they were able to become emperors and sovereigns. And that also is the reason that all the various sages and arhats are born in their nations and bring great benefits. But if a time should come when the good fortune of these rulers runs out, then all the sages will abandon them and depart. Once the sages have departed, then the 7 disasters are certain to arise. So don't take my word for it. The Medicine Master Sutra states, if disasters and calamities should befall members of the ruling Kshatriya class and anointed kings, such disasters will be as follows: the calamity of disease and pestilence among the populace, the calamity of invasion of foreign lands, and the calamity of revolt with one's own domain, the calamity of irregularities and strange occurrences among the stars and constellations, the calamity of eclipses of the sun and moon, calamity of unreasonable wind and rain, the calamity of rain that fails to fall, even if the season for it has come and gone. In the Benevolent King's Sutra, the Buddha addresses King Prasennachit with these words. Great King, the region where my teachings now hold sway consists of 1 billion Sumera worlds with 1 billion suns and moons. Each of these Sumera worlds comprises 4 continents. In the southern continent of the Jambudvipa, there are 16 great states, 500 middle-sized states, and 10,000 small states. In these states, 7 types of fearful disasters may occur. All the rulers of these states agree that these are indeed disasters. What, then, are these disasters? When the sun and moon depart from their regular course and the seasons come in wrong order, and when the red sun or black sun appears, when 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 suns appear at the same time, when the sun is eclipsed and loses its light, or when 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 coronas appear around the sun, this is the first disaster. When the 28 constellations do not move in their regular courses, when the metal star, the broom star, the wheel star, the demon star, you can look into the notes on this chapter and get explanations for all of those. And you can see your own analogies with the way we look at the heavens today. When huge fires consume the nation, you don't have to look far for that, and the people are all burned to death. We just had that. Or when there are outbreaks of demon fire, dragon fire, heavenly fire, mountain god fire, human fire. So all these different personifications, right? When these prodigies appear, this is the third disaster. When huge floods drown the population, when the seasons come out of order and the rain is in winter, snow in summer, thunder and lightning in winter, and ice and frost and hail in the sixth month, blah, blah, blah. When red, black, or green rain falls, when acid rain. It's not hard to make the analogies with these things. They're very colorful, no pun intended. But remember their time they're from. Remember the people they're speaking to. Remember the way they may have actually experienced these things. It's not difficult to see the analogies. When huge winds blow and the people to their death, and the lands, the mountains and rivers and trees and forests are all at one time wiped out. When great winds come out of season, or when black winds, red winds, green. Here we go again. This is the fifth disaster. When heaven and earth and the whole country are stricken by terrible heat, so that the air seems to be on fire. When the 100 plants wither and the 5 kinds of grain fail to ripen. When the earth is red and scorched. These are the sixth disaster. This is famine, right? And it's happening. When enemies rise up on all 4 sides and invade the nation. That's the 7th disaster. The Great Collection Sutra says, though for countless existences in the past the ruler of a state may have practiced the giving of alms, observed the precepts, and cultivated wisdom, if he sees that my teaching is in danger of perishing and stands idly without doing anything to protect it, then all the inestimable roots of goodness that he has planted throughout the practices just mentioned will be entirely wiped out. And this country will become the scene of 3 inauspicious occurrences. The first is high grain prices. We could see that as fuel. The second is warfare. And the third is epidemics. Look, we're getting epidemics now of things that we thought we'd long eradicated. And I was just talking to somebody yesterday about this. You know, there's a huge measles outbreak going on in Vancouver right now. These kind of things are happening worldwide. We don't hear about them all because we want to be kept docile and ignorant. Otherwise, those who are allowing this to happen, their power would be threatened. Not a conspiracy theory, fact. We are now so deluded that some of us think that the medicines that we've developed for a century, and I'm not a big defender of the whole AMA, doctors and pharma and all of that. I think they're a for-profit industry and there's a lot of danger in them. But a lot of that danger comes from an over-reliance on trusting everything they do. However, there's a funky backlash to that. The people that refuse to get their children vaccinated now because they found some causal relationship. Things that we long eradicated, like measles, polio, and chicken pox and other things. Really scourges, horrible diseases. Not even just diseases, but plagues that just wiped out huge chunks of our population in the past. We found medications to stop it, but it didn't eliminate it. See, that's our illusion. We think, oh, well, we got rid of measles. It doesn't exist anymore. Wrong. What we did is we inoculated humans to be able to resist it. It still exists. It's out there. And we have the evidence. It's happening now. New epidemics are rising up of these old scourges. And they're very hard to get under control. And their source is because people decided we don't need that anymore. And lo and behold, whoop, come right back. There's a deluded arrogance in that. There's a deluded, willful ignorance in that. Because I say it, it is so. You know, this is one thing that I've heard often repeated by great leaders in Buddhism who will say that it's important to have a resolute mind and be determined to be one with Buddha. It's important to study and read with that conviction what our practice is and how to conduct ourselves as Buddhists, how to observe our minds. It's very important. It's critical. It's essential. But not at the expense. I mean, we're honing our observational skills. So to do so in one way and then to ignore the experienced, observable world is a huge contradiction. You're not understanding the meaning of the teachings if you don't understand that you can't heal your broken arm by chanting. You may need to go to a doctor and use some human means of resetting your bone and putting in a cast to heal quickly and correctly. And chant about that. See, that this is a danger of putting your mind. You have to be constantly vigilant in observing your mind. That you don't turn it into a mystic wishing stone. It's easy for humans to do. We like magic. It's very appealing. But it leads us to evil paths. Screwed up thinking. All right. I think I'm going to stop there today. This is a long Gosho. There's a ton of stuff in it. But it's more important for me that you get the meaning of these Gosho than to race through them. So I hope that's okay with you. I hope you get something out of it. Thank you for participating. As always, I thank you so very, very much. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. See you for part 3.